The galaxy was vast, endless, and full of powerful empires. Each star system had its own history, its own rulers, and its own pride. The Valar were known for their mighty fleets. The Zorith were masters of strategy and politics. The Alari were ancient, wise, and deeply respected. Across the stars, these races stood tall, proud of their place in the endless dance of civilizations. But hidden in a small corner of the galaxy was a planet that no one cared about. Its name was Earth. To the grand empires, this world was nothing but a minor rock circling a yellow sun. It was fragile, divided, and behind in technology. Its people were considered weak, unstable, and violent in their own small ways. To the galaxy, humans were not worth notice. They were seen as children playing with fire, dangerous only to themselves. And so the Great Council made a quiet decision long ago. Earth should remain alone, isolated, and forgotten. The humans would live and die on their little planet, and the galaxy would not bother with them. Yet in the shadows of forgotten archives, the truth of humanity was never fully erased. Old records existed, hidden deep in vaults no one visited. Ancient words carved in the history of other species still carried warnings. And those warnings spoke not of weakness, but of terror. The story said that long ago, before the great empires even existed, humans had faced visitors from the stars. They had been attacked, invaded, and nearly destroyed. But instead of falling, they had risen. Instead of surrendering, they had fought back with a fury so deep it shook the stars themselves. The tales described humans as beings who carried war not just in their weapons, but in their very nature. They were not stronger, they were not smarter, but they were relentless. No matter how many times they were struck down, they rose again. No matter how much they suffered, they endured. The records gave humanity a name that echoed like thunder, the sleeping gods of war. But over time, these stories were dismissed. Scholars called them myths. Leaders ignored them. They said humans had no great fleets, no empire, no advanced technology.
How can such a primitive species be dangerous?
They asked. How can these fragile creatures of flesh and blood ever threaten the galaxy? And so the warnings were buried. The galaxy convinced itself that humanity was harmless. They convinced themselves that the stories were just legends, old superstitions passed down by frightened races who had seen shadows where there was nothing. Yet, the truth remained. Humanity was not harmless. They were only sleeping. On Earth, the people lived their lives unaware of the galaxy's judgment. They fought among themselves, they built, they dreamed, they struggled. They were divided by borders, by politics, by old scars that never healed. To the stars, this only proved their weakness. But those who looked deeper saw something else. They saw a fire that never went out. They saw a species that refused to die no matter how many times history tried to crush them. War, pain, and struggle had shaped them for thousands of years. And though they did not know it, though they believed themselves small and ordinary, they carried within them the legacy of survival. The galaxy had forgotten humanity. But forgetting did not erase what they were. In the silence of the night sky, Earth waited. Humanity waited. The stars watched, not knowing that one day the sleeping gods would open their eyes. And when that day came, the galaxy would remember the truth. They were never weak. They were never harmless. They were only sleeping. Calrin was a young historian of the Zorith species. Unlike the politicians and admirals of his people, he did not hunger for power or victory. His passion was knowledge. He loved old archives, forgotten data, and the hidden corners of galactic history where others did not care to look. One cycle, deep in the great library of Valar Prime, Calrin uncovered something strange. It was an old file, locked behind layers of outdated security codes. Most records like this were dull, trade routes, lost treaties, or star charts long out of date. But this file was different. The title froze him where he stood. It read, "The Human Wars." Curiosity pulled him in. He decrypted the file and began to read. The words painted a picture darker than anything he had seen before. The file spoke of a time thousands of years ago, when humans had first encountered visitors from the stars. The invaders were strong, their weapons advanced, their armies endless. Humanity was outmatched in every way. By logic, the humans should have been wiped out within weeks. But that was not what happened. Instead, the humans fought with a desperation that defied reason. They turned every field, every mountain, every ruined city into a battlefield. When weapons failed, they fought with fire, with stone, with their bare hands. They refused to surrender. And worse for their enemies, they learned. The more they suffered, the more dangerous they became. They copied weapons. They built traps. They struck not only soldiers, but supplies, ships, and leaders. No place was safe from their anger. Calren read with wide eyes, his heart's pounding. The file described how entire empires fell under the storm of human resistance. The final line sent chills down his spine. "Pray they never wake again." Calren closed the file, trembling. He did not know if it was truth or exaggeration, but something inside told him it was real. The words carried the weight of fear, not fiction. Whoever had written them had seen humanity's fury with their own eyes. He rushed to the council chambers. Before the gathering of representatives, he shared what he had found. His voice shook, but his conviction was strong. "We have made a mistake," he said. "The humans are not weak. They are dangerous. They are sleeping gods of war, and if we ever provoke them, the galaxy will pay the price." The council listened in silence. Then laughter filled the chamber. The Valor delegate waved a claw dismissively. "Myths," he said. "Old ghost stories to frighten children." The Alari representative smiled with pity. "Calren, you are young. Do not let old tales cloud your reason. The humans have no fleets, no empire, no allies. They are isolated and powerless." One by one, the council dismissed his warning. To them, it was nothing but superstition. But Calren could not let it go. That night, as he sat alone in his quarters, he stared out at the stars. He thought of Earth, forgotten and ignored. He thought of the words etched into that final line, "Pray they never wake again." Why would an ancient writer leave such a message if there was no truth? Why would they describe fear so deep if nothing had happened? Calren felt a chill move through him. The galaxy was blind. They believed the humans were harmless, but he was no longer sure. For in the history of every species there were stories of battles won and lost. But only in humanity's history did he see something else, an endless refusal to die, a fire that burned even in the darkest night. Calren whispered to himself, almost afraid to speak the words aloud. If they wake again, the galaxy will tremble. And far away on the small blue planet called Earth, the sleeping gods remained unaware of the storm that was slowly approaching. The silence around Earth did not last forever. The galaxy was always moving, always hungry, and peace was only an illusion between wars. When the Dravari Empire expanded, they looked for weak prey to conquer. Their fleet searched for worlds rich with resources but poor in defense. One day, their warships found Earth. At first, they scanned the planet with contempt. The humans had no orbital defenses, no great fleets, no advanced technology. Their weapons were primitive, their governments divided, their armies scattered. To the Dravari, it was not a battle. It was a harvest. The Dravari commander sent a message that echoed across Earth's skies. His voice was cold and proud as it played in every major city. Humans of Earth, you belong to the Dravari Empire now. Surrender your planet, surrender your resources, and surrender your lives. Those who resist will burn. The world froze. For centuries, humans had dreamed of contact with alien life. They had imagined peace, friendship, and exploration. But now that dream shattered. The truth arrived not as friends, but as conquerors, leaders argued. Governments struggled. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to fight. But before decisions could be made, the Dravari proved their message was no bluff. Without warning, they fired from orbit. A city of millions was consumed in fire and ash. Skies turned black with smoke. Children screamed as buildings crumbled. The message was clear: submit or die. Something ancient stirred within humanity that day. Fear, yes, but also rage. A fire that had slept for generations began to burn again. For the first time in centuries, the divided nations of Earth stood together. Old rivals shook hands. Old enemies set aside their hatred. Humanity, fractured for so long, remembered what it meant to be one people. The humans sent a single reply to the Dravari: we will never surrender. The war began. The Dravari expected quick victory. Their ships rained fire from orbit. Their soldiers marched across burning fields. They thought resistance would crumble in days. But the humans fought with a spirit the galaxy had forgotten. Every street became a battlefield. Every ruined building became a fortress. Soldiers and civilians alike stood against the invaders. They did not fight for empire or conquest. They fought for survival, for their families, for their world. And when they were beaten down, they rose again. When their weapons failed, they used knives, fire, and even their bare hands. The Dravari commander, who had laughed at the weakness of Earth, soon began to realize his mistake. These were not simple prey. These were not helpless children. These were warriors who carried war in their blood. The humans were learning. Captured weapons were taken apart and studied. New tactics were born in the chaos. Engineers who once built machines of peace now designed weapons deadlier than the enemy's own. Humanity adapted faster than the Dravari could understand. The galaxy, watching from afar, was stunned. Reports spread of human resistance, of Dravari losses mounting higher than expected. Impossible, the Valar said. They have no fleets, no technology. Then how do they still stand? The Alari whispered. The answer was simple. Humans refused to die. Calrin, the young historian, followed every report. His heart pounded as he read the news. He remembered the old words carved into forgotten records. Pray they never wake again. Now he understood. Humanity had been sleeping, but the Dravari had made the mistake of striking first. And in doing so, they had awoken the very thing the galaxy had feared. On Earth, the war burned brighter with each passing day. The humans were no longer afraid. They were angry, and anger, mixed with unity, was turning them into something unstoppable. The sleeping gods of war were beginning to rise. The first months of war were chaos. Earth burned under the Dravari assault, yet humanity refused to bow. From the ruins of fallen cities, fighters rose. From the ashes of despair, courage grew. The humans had been caught unprepared, but they were learning with every breath, with every battle, with every drop of blood. The Dravari soldiers were stronger, their weapons sharper, their machines more advanced. By logic, every battle should have been a defeat for mankind, but the humans fought with something logic could not measure. They fought with rage. They fought with hope. They fought with the desperate fire of a species standing on the edge of extinction. When one city fell, survivors carried news and knowledge to the next. When one army was crushed, another rose, fiercer than before. The Dravari commander grew frustrated. For every victory he claimed, the humans answered with 100 small wounds, cutting his forces apart. Every street became a trap. Every forest became a battlefield. Even the ruins of broken cities turned against the invaders, filled with human resistance fighters who struck and vanished like ghosts. And worse, the humans were no longer fighting only with their own weapons. They stole Dravari rifles from the dead. They hacked into their systems. They captured machines and learned how to use them. Human engineers who once built cars, bridges, and satellites now tore apart alien technology, rebuilding it with desperate brilliance. A weapon that took the Dravari centuries to perfect, the humans remade in weeks. They were not copying. They were adapting, reshaping, and improving. The galaxy watched in shock. Messages spread from system to system. How are the humans resisting? Why do they not surrender? What drives them to stand against an empire so powerful? The answers began to spread too. Observers whispered of human history, of centuries of struggle and conflict on their own world. No species in the galaxy had fought as much, had suffered as much, or had endured as much as mankind. War was not strange to them. It was a language written in their bones. On Valar Prime, Calrin followed every report with wide eyes. He remembered the council's laughter, their mocking voices dismissing the warnings as myths. Now those myths were living again, he whispered to himself in the darkness of the archives. They are waking. On Earth, soldiers and civilians fought side by side. Fathers and mothers defended their children. Young and old stood with weapons in their hands. It was not just armies that resisted. It was an entire species, and slowly the tide began to shift. The Dravari, once certain of victory, began to lose more than they gained. Their soldiers, trained to expect quick conquest, now faced nightmares in every ruined city. Their ships, once unchallenged, now found themselves hunted by humans who had learned to fight in space faster than anyone thought possible. The Dravari commander, once proud and arrogant, began to feel something he had never felt before: fear. His fleets were vast, but his enemy was endless. For every human that fell, another rose in their place, carrying the same fire, the same fury. They are not supposed to fight like this, he said to his officers. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The humans had awakened. The council, watching from afar, could no longer laugh. What they saw in the humans was not weakness. It was something far more dangerous. The humans had been underestimated, ignored, dismissed. But now they were revealing their true nature. The sleeping gods of war were no longer dreaming. They were opening their eyes, and the galaxy began to tremble. Months passed. The war that was meant to be a quick conquest dragged on into a storm the Dravari could not control. Their fleets still filled the skies. Their soldiers still marched on Earth's soil, yet their victories brought them no closer to peace. For every city they destroyed, humanity grew harder, sharper, and more determined. The humans no longer fought only to defend. They fought to win. On the front lines, human soldiers began using captured Dravari weapons as if they had been trained with them for years. Farmers, mechanics, and students became warriors, their hands steady and their eyes filled with fire. Engineers who once built bridges now designed bombs. Doctors who once healed wounds now led resistance groups in the shadows, using their knowledge of life to bring destruction upon the invaders. It was no longer just survival. It was revenge. The Dravari soon learned that humans did not fight fairly. When outnumbered, they struck from the shadows. When cornered, they attacked with everything they had. No retreat, no surrender, only defiance. Entire Dravari battalions were lured into ruined cities, only to be swallowed by fire and traps. Ships in orbit were disabled by human hackers, their own systems turned against them. Even supply lines were never safe. Human guerrilla fighters struck like wolves, vanishing before the enemy could respond. The more pressure the Dravari applied, the more dangerous humanity became. The more they suffered, the stronger they grew. Whispers began to spread across the galaxy. Traders carried stories of impossible battles, of humans holding the line against forces 10 times their size. Some told of Dravari commanders who abandoned posts rather than face humans again. Others spoke of strange human courage, soldiers fighting until their last breath, refusing to kneel even as fire consumed them. The galaxy listened, and fear grew. Calrin, the young historian, read these reports with both awe and dread. He remembered the final line of the old archive, "Pray they never wake again." And now, with every victory, with every rumor of human defiance, he knew that prayer had gone unanswered. The council called emergency meetings. Their delegates argued endlessly. Some demanded that aid be given to the Dravari, fearing what would happen if the humans truly won. Others whispered the opposite, that perhaps humanity should be left alone, for no empire wanted to become their next enemy. But the humans did not hear these debates. They were too busy fighting. On Earth, the tide of battle shifted. Human-built ships, patched together with stolen technology, rose from the atmosphere like avenging spirits. They were crude, but they worked. Dravari fleets found themselves facing enemies they had not expected. Human fleets forged from desperation and rage, and with every passing battle, the humans grew stronger. They were not only surviving, they were learning to conquer. The Dravari commander, once confident of victory, now saw his empire's strength crumbling before his eyes. He could not understand it. "They should be broken by now," he muttered, pacing aboard his flagship. "No species can endure this much loss. No species can suffer this much pain and still rise stronger." But humanity was not like other species. They had been forged by endless wars, endless struggles, endless history of fighting against themselves, against nature, against every challenge their world had thrown at them. And now, all that history had turned into a weapon. A captured Dravari officer, his spirit shattered, was questioned by his superiors. His words shook even the most hardened soldiers of the Empire. "They are not human," he whispered. "They are gods of war, and we have woken them." And across the galaxy, that whisper became a warning. The sleeping gods were not only awake, they were beginning to take back the stars. The war that had begun as a Dravari invasion was no longer contained to Earth. Humanity, once trapped on their small blue planet, now carried the war into the stars. The first human-built fleets were crude, patched together from wreckage and stolen technology. Their ships looked ugly beside the sleek vessels of the Dravari, but they were fast, deadly, and filled with warriors who had nothing left to fear. When the first human fleet launched into space, the galaxy held its breath. Many expected disaster. Instead, the impossible happened. The Dravari warships, proud and well-armed, fell one by one. The humans did not fight like other species. They did not care for honor or tradition. They fought with creativity, with desperation, with cunning that left the enemy confused and broken. Traps were laid in asteroid fields. Small, weak ships became decoys for devastating ambushes. Entire fleets disappeared into silence, only to strike when the Dravari least expected. It was not war as the galaxy knew it. It was something older, something raw. It was human war. The Dravari colonies began to fall. Outposts that once stood proud now burned. Garrisons that expected easy victories were overrun by human troops carrying both stolen rifles and their own fierce resolve. The empire that had once laughed at humanity now tasted its own fear. Reports from surviving soldiers told the same story again and again. They never stop. They never surrender. Even when we destroy them, more rise to take their place. The Dravari people themselves began to question their leaders. Why did we attack them? Why did we not leave them sleeping? But it was too late. The storm was awake, and it would not rest until the skies were free. Calrin, the young historian who had once been mocked for his warnings, watched in silence as his predictions became truth. The archives had spoken of this, but even he had not imagined how quickly the humans would grow. From warriors of the ground, they had become masters of space. From survivors of invasion, they had become conquerors of the stars. The council grew nervous. Debates turned into shouting. Some argued that humanity should be destroyed before it became too strong. Others whispered fearfully that such a thing was impossible now. If the Dravari cannot break them, one delegate said, then none of us can. The galaxy trembled. For the first time in living memory, the balance of power shifted, not because of a mighty empire, but because of a forgotten world that had been left to sleep. On the front lines, the Dravari commander felt despair. His fleets were crumbling, his empire breaking. He had underestimated the humans once, but now he understood. He had not awakened children. He had awakened giants. Every battle was a reminder. Humanity was not only fighting with weapons, they were fighting with their very spirit. Even in defeat, they learned. Even in loss, they grew. At last, the Dravari commander faced his council of war. His voice was low, heavy with fear. We cannot defeat them, he admitted. They are not like us. They are not like anyone. They are something greater. We thought them weak, but they are gods of war, and we have shattered our empire by waking them. Across the stars, worlds that had once bowed to the Dravari now raised their eyes to the humans. Some saw salvation, others saw doom, but all understood the same truth. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. The sleeping gods of war were not merely awake. They were marching forward, and the galaxy could only watch as the Dravari Empire, once mighty and feared, began to crumble under the weight of humanity's fury. The war had begun with fire raining on Earth. Now, it ended with fire raining on the Dravari homeworld. The once mighty empire that had stretched across stars now lay in ruins. Their fleets were shattered, their colonies burned, their armies broken. And the name that haunted every survivor's lips was the same: humanity. The final battle was not a clash of equals. It was a storm. Human fleets forged in desperation now moved like predators through the void. Their ships were no longer crude copies. They were hybrids, powerful machines built from both human creativity and stolen alien technology. The Dravari fought with everything they had left, but it was not enough. Humanity had learned too much too quickly. Their tactics were unpredictable, their courage unshakable, their fury endless. As the Dravari capital burned, the commander of their last fleet watched the impossible unfold. His voice cracked as he spoke to his officers. "We should never have touched them," he whispered. "We thought them weak. But they are not weak. They are gods of war, and we woke them." On Earth, the people watched the stars with quiet pride. They had lost so much, cities turned to ash, countless lives stolen. But their pain had become their strength. For the first time in history, humanity was united not by fear but by victory. The galaxy held its breath. The Valar, who once mocked humanity, now feared them. The Alari, who dismissed old legends, now bowed their heads in silence. And Calrin, the young historian who had uncovered the warnings, stood before the council and spoke the truth with a trembling voice. "You all laughed when I warned you. But look now, the myths were real. Humanity is awake. The gods of war are not sleeping anymore." No one laughed this time. The council chambers were silent. the weight of truth pressing down on every delegate. They knew now what the galaxy had unleashed. Humanity was not simply another species. They were a force, a storm, a reminder that survival, when pushed to its edge, could become divinity. But the most terrifying truth was this: the humans had not chosen this war. They had not wanted conquest. They had not dreamed of empire. They had only wanted peace, and yet when peace was broken, they had risen higher than anyone imagined possible. If this was what they could do while newly awakened, what would they become in centuries to come? That thought chilled even the bravest hearts. On Earth, amid the ruins, humans rebuilt. Families wept for the lost, but they also celebrated the living. Soldiers returned home scarred but unbroken. Engineers looked to the stars, already planning what humanity's fleets would become. For though they had not sought this war, they could not ignore what it had revealed. They were no longer hidden, no longer forgotten. The galaxy knew their name now, and it would never forget. The humans had awakened, and the galaxy would never sleep easily again. Calren watched from afar, his heart torn between awe and fear. He knew the galaxy would write songs of this war, songs of human defiance, songs of human victory. But in those songs there would always be a warning hidden in the melody. Do not wake the sleeping gods, and yet it was too late. They were already awake. The humans stood among the stars, no longer weak, no longer forgotten. They had risen from ashes, turned pain into strength, and carved their name into the galaxy's memory with fire and steel. And as their fleet sailed into the endless night, one truth echoed in every heart, friend and enemy alike: humanity was never weak. Humanity was never harmless. Humanity was only sleeping, and now the gods of war were awake.